Kryptonite. When Superman was first created, he was pretty popular. But then as time went on and on, each comic book they released, he just kept winning. And people got really, really tired of Superman. So I've got like 3 slides worth of characters again. I know we went over it, but just take this kind of like as a rebreather. So your characters, you do want to introduce them fairly early on. We want to know who we're talking about. My NWA, I didn't necessarily have characters, but I would suggest you put them in there. Mine was all exposition, but again, I would suggest you actually have more of a story than the one I had written. You give readers a look at your characters, so you describe them pretty early on too. If you don't do that, the reader is going to make up somebody in their mind, and then if you end up describing them later on, it's going to completely break the reader's perception of of that character. You give them a backstory. We talked about that. We talked about making them vulnerable and flawed, but I forgot to mention you do want to give them heroic qualities, because I know we talked about making them human, but you also do want to make them heroes or heroines as much as you possibly can. So something like bravery, you'll want to give them bravery. They have inner and outer problems. So the outer problems, that's the main conflict, but they can have inner problems too. So say they're really emotional because maybe something in their backstory, they lost one of their friends or lost one of their family members, right? Inner problems. That, or they could have anger issues, right? And then you can also use your own experiences to obviously create a character. I would suggest not doing this wholeheartedly, like 100% using your experiences. Otherwise, you're just creating yourself, and a lot of times people will be able to tell. So just kind of use it as a baseline. These are some of the things you might want to question yourself on. How old are they? How old are they? Their nationality, if they have scars, piercing, tattoos, physical imperfections. What do they sound like? Do they have an accent? So sound, that's a really, really good descriptor, especially for characters. They can have a really deep voice. They can have a really gravelly voice, really high-pitched, annoying. It could be whatever you'd like. Use gestures, mannerisms, and phrases. Do they? So a lot of times, every single one of us have different phrases we use often. These people, these characters, would probably do the exact same thing. So do they have any of those? And then I think we also talked about, it's like if they're nervous, they chew at their fingernails and stuff like that, or So think about those things. You'll also want to think about their familial and friendly relationships, their occupation, demographics. Think of demographics for a character. Okay, you'll want to think about those things. Their skills, their talents, also their downsides and weaknesses and stuff like that. Their worldview, that's pretty important, because a lot of times a reader will be able to tell what a person's worldview is, a character's worldview. So, for instance, what if they're a cynic? If they're a cynic, obviously it's going to portray in their actions, right? Anger and fear triggers, that's a big one, because we all have them. Anger and fear triggers, okay? That'll make them more human if you flesh those things out. And then obviously their joys and pleasures. Okay, so a little bit more about imperfection. These are some examples. So Indiana Jones, he's a really brave guy, right? But his fear is snakes. Makes sense, even though he's an adventurer. Superman, kryptonite. When Superman was first created, he was pretty popular. But then as time went on and on, each comic book they released, he just kept winning. And people got really, really tired of Superman because he had no weaknesses. Everybody knew the ending. Everybody knew the outcome. Every single issue for the comic book. Oh, he's going to win. Until they introduced kryptonite. And then for all intents and purposes, it's going to sound cheesy, but Darth Vader is technically the perfect character. Technically the perfect story arc, character arc, all of it.
It's the best story ever.
Yes, yeah, it really is. And it most likely is carried down through generations of storytelling. It's just... Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, and if you'll notice, a lot of the really, really popular stories, even in today's media, they carry on from, centuries prior. The exact same story arcs and stuff like that. So one of his weaknesses was emotion, and one of them was emotion for his lover, Padme. Right? It makes him human, and that was his downfall. Okay. So ask yourself, what keeps them awake at night? This is getting really, really deep into your character, right? I know we have 3 pages, but this can just help flesh them out a lot. What are their secrets? What embarrasses them? That's a big one. If you ever put in a story that, that your character's cheeks flushed, it's very telling to the reader. What passion drives them. So base your characters on you and your experiences, how you react to those situations, but again, not completely. Because if you do it completely, I would react to this in every single instance of this character, you're just making yourself. And people will be able to tell. What I do when I write is I just use pieces of myself for each character. Okay? And then other times I change it up. I'm going to do the exact opposite. So for this character, the character would do the exact opposite of what I would do. Show, don't tell. Readers can deduce character through dialogue and action. So you don't have to do a whole exposition about your character. You can show who they are through dialogue and action. Don't introduce a character with a narrative summary. Don't just say they do this, 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 and this. Nobody likes that. We like stories for a reason. The structure of the story obviously should flow, and so should the structure of the character. Capture detail through the 5 senses. That's really important. That's all a story is the 5 senses. We sit by a campfire at night when we're all around our friends, and we tell stories based on how we felt, what we saw, what we heard, what we tasted. You get the picture. So the main conflict is the driving force of your story. I should be able to tell what the main conflict is. It's overarching. Okay, it literally drives the story. So you introduce the setting and the world building, whatever. You introduce the characters, and then there's a big conflict. And they have to overcome this, otherwise all hell breaks loose. Allows the development of your characters. How do they respond to it? Do they learn from it or fail repeatedly? Characters can do that. They can continue failing if they don't realize their mistakes. And it's obviously a build-up toward the climax. So the climax is the opportunity for your character to prove themselves. It highlights their weaknesses, but also how they overcome them and how they overcome that problem or obstacle. Now, I think the main factor of a climax is those last 2 bullet points there. So failure equals a miserable failure. Most of the time in movies and stuff today, what we'll do is the world is ending. Look at every Marvel movie ever, especially recently. If we don't fix this, the universe is gonna blow up, right? Yeah, that's every Marvel movie ever. And so that's the climax. We already know what the climax is. And then the success is like, okay, if we do succeed, then the whole universe is saved. The whole world is saved. Denouement is the falling action, draws the narrative to a close, ties up loose ends. Don't have any loose ends. And I can give you an example with that 3rd bullet point there. Questions. If you introduce a question at the beginning of a story, for instance, and you don't answer it, it's a big problem. Nobody likes that. Even in cliffhangers, when those things are on purpose, people don't really like cliffhangers. They don't want to wait. They want those questions answered. And the falling action leads to closure. And finally, after you get to the closure, the resolution. All sunshine and rainbows. Typically, that's the ending right there. Happily ever after. Typically. All my books, they end terribly because I like to end them terribly and get a reaction out of people. But most of the time, I want to say like 98% of the time, people want a happy ending. Okay? They want it to end good.